The crucifix is a strangely big deal for people because crucifixes can freak out Christians that haven't been raised with them and been raised with a bare cross. And my first freak out experience was when I was about 8 years old, and I was sitting in a military chapel and watched what we called the RP, the religious program specialist. He was the chaplain's assistant, essentially, come out into the Navy chapel there, and he, as it were, struck the set from the Protestant service and began to set up for Mass. And so he's changing all the vestments and, flipping everything over, and the military had these double-sided vestments and altar decorations and stuff like that would have like a Catholic side and a Protestant side, so you could just flip them over to switch out the chapel for a different service. And at the culmination of this whole process, he grabs the cross that's on the altar, flips it around, and there's a crucifix on the back of it for Mass. And I'm looking at it, and one side is just IHS, and it's a blank cross, and that's what it looked like on the altar when my dad was preaching for the Protestant service. And now, boom, there's a corpus, and I'm like, whoa, that was behind there all the time, and I didn't know. It was a disconcerting experience. So that was my first experience of this realization that Catholic worship was different, and I wasn't really comfortable with kind of the Catholicism is so physical. Catholicism is so incarnational. It's so tangible. Things like relics and so on you touch. And the sacraments touch you, and a lot of Protestantism is much more kind of theoretical and like Platonic. Jesus doesn't touch your body. You kind of think about how he loves you and stuff like that. It's kind of like it's spiritual or in the head, but not contacting the body. And so there was this. I grew up with this discomfort of kind of the graphicness of Catholic art and Catholic iconography and so on. But I had a good friend in high school who was a practicing Catholic, and when I pressed him on those things, he said, the body on the cross, the corpus on the crucifix, really reminds me of how much Jesus went through in order to save me. And I thought, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I can accept that. So around in high school, I got some degree of comfort with my best friend who was Catholic, with him wearing a crucifix and his explanation of it. So much later, in life, when I went to the campus of Notre Dame, I had developed a greater tolerance for Catholic art. And but really, there's a profound difference there because the crucifix versus the bare cross really represents the difference between the spirituality of much of Protestantism and the spirituality of the Catholic Church. Within the Catholic Church, we believe in redemptive suffering, that our personal sufferings in this life are helping us in holiness, whereas you only rarely find that outside the Catholic Church in Protestant circles. The dominant mode in Protestantism, in my experience at least, was Jesus worked hard so you don't have to. Okay, Jesus suffered so that you don't have to suffer. So we just tried to avoid all suffering. There was no point in it. It didn't lead you closer, holier, or anything like that. But in Catholic, of course, you can't avoid suffering in life. And so the spirituality of the Catholic Church has been so much more satisfying for my wife and I, because we've learned that these sufferings that we can't avoid nonetheless fit into God's loving plan for us and are actually His way of calling us out of ourselves to a deeper level that we would never have the guts to choose for ourselves. There are certain kinds of things in your life that you could never bring up the gumption to actually voluntarily sign up for, say, a special needs child, or the death of a loved one, or something like this. But God has to send these things our way. We couldn't, voluntarily choose them, but He wants us to grow. And so in his mysterious, what C.S. Lewis calls his severe mercy, he sends us these things that become the opportunities for us to become more like Him and learn to love in a more profound way.